Our gym for rookies. I've had a blast going through all these different aspects of playing guitar for rookies, for these passionate weekend warriors, and if you're just sort of getting used to guitar or are sort of returning to the beginning and trying to build something again from the ground up. This course has been really focusing on some of the real smart training techniques that have ranged from the first week we did talking about playing chords, getting a handle on bar chords and thumb position, things like that. And we did playing chord progressions. Last week we tackled some strum patterns, and we talked about what it means to separate the beat and to sort of start visualizing the beat not just as this really bizarre click. A lot of metronomes just have that one light that comes on and you anticipate it. You don't know exactly when the light's going to come back on again. But learning to be as comfortable with as comfortable with the space as you are with the click. And that's a really important thing. So we talked about that. This week I want to talk about playing single notes. The next couple of weeks, we won't have a lesson next week with Memorial Day, but the week after we'll pick up again. We'll do some scales, some pentatonic scales, arpeggios. We'll get into some finger picking as well. But this week I really want to zero in and talk about developing a good pick technique. And a good pick technique, there's a lot of freedom within what that means. There's not one specific way to do it. So I remember when I was first starting, I remember watching this old VHS tape of Eddie Van Halen, right? And he would hold his pick like this. And I, for the life of me, could not figure out how that worked because, he would sort of do this tremolo picking pattern. And I could never make that work. And so I bailed on that. And then I remember seeing Michelangelo Battio, you may know the pronunciation better than I, but he plays this crazy guitar that's got 4 necks on it. And he would plant 3 fingers on the top of the guitar and then just do this super fast shred thing. And so I tried that for a while, and then my finger would get in the way of the string and it was just a mess. And so I sort of stumbled upon a way that seems to be really comfortable for me, and hopefully that will be comfortable for you. The idea of making sure you're as comfortable with the up as you are with the down is really important in developing a good pick technique, right? So what I want to do is I want to hop right into exercise 1. E. So if you'll see 1 E and 2 E, so that'll sound like 1 E and 2 E, and so you'll accent those notes. We'll go on each string, but instead of just doing an open, I remember when I was getting started with pick technique, there were a lot of the exercises were just open, and let's put it over a pretty chord. All right, so this chord that's going to happen on the left hand, even though we're focusing mostly on the right hand today, we'll do some little patterns on this side, but go ahead and put your first finger on the A string on the 2nd fret. So you'll notice in the tab there that we don't get to this until measure 3, that 3rd line, but you want to have it pressed down and prepared, ready to go. So you'll put your first finger here, and you can use your 3rd finger or your 4th finger. This doesn't matter, as long as you can reach this comfortably. This is an E minor add 9 here. And so you want to put on the D string on the 4th fret, right? And so if you strum the whole thing, it sounds like this, which has just a little bit of something interesting. And again, I've tried to develop all of these exercises around something that sounds pleasing to the ear. We're going to go way left field on some exercises today because it's really good for the pick technique and might not sound quite, it sounds a little Twilight Zone-ish. But at least for this exercise, it's a really nice sounding chord. What we're going to do is going to work our way from the high E string all the way down to the low E. And when you're practicing this throughout the week, you can actually go ascending, descending, ascending, descending. Right now I'm just going to do the descending. But basically how it works is what you want to do is start with, we're going to go, okay, so 1 E and 2 E and when you're accenting notes, it's really important not to overplay the accent, right? A lot of times with guitar players, we play very, very strong and really, really, sometimes you can get a little bit of the buzz out of the string. Start to think about the accent being a sort of normal pick volume, and then the notes that come after that to actually be less. So instead of thinking about playing with power and trying to accent above that, we're just going to take all of that and shift it down just a little bit. So our normal playing, just like that, all right? And what we're going to do, let's just try this together, just measure 1, just to get a handle on how this is going to work. And we'll do this at 50 beats per minute. And last week I talked about, this is a little metronome that I love, first and foremost because I can't check any messages on it. There's no notification telling me that I may be eligible for some reward and I need to click this now. This just does one thing, right? But it also has kind of the movement of the beat with the lights. And I find that a very helpful thing. So if you don't have that, that's okay. Sometimes just sort of shifting from side to side or your foot or something so you can feel what's happening in between the clicks will really, really help. All right, so enough gab, let's go. So 50 beats per minute. And we're just going to start with measure 1 for now. Let's repeat that, and then we're going to add the rest of the measure in. 1, 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and All right, so I didn't do the B string there, so I lied. We were doing half of measure number 1. But I want to make sure that you're comfortable doing that on 1 string. Because in the guitar gym, right, we're talking about how to train smart. It's not just repetition, it's proper repetition, right? The last thing you want to do is practice and play something and repeat it over and over and over without really dissecting what is important and crucial about that exercise, because then you're rehearsing the mistakes, and you don't want to do that. You want your muscle memory to really grab the correct way to play. So what we want to do here is make sure that you get comfortable on 1 string, and then we cross to another string. This is where things get a little bit interesting with alternate picking. And what you'll notice is that if you look at measure 1, the last time that we play the high E string is an upstroke. And then the first time that we play the B string is going to be a down. And you'll notice there's this kind of outside bizarre thing that's happening. You're going to go up on the E, and you're going to have to go down on the B. So you're playing on almost the outside of each string. Sometimes you'll play on the inside of each string, right? But this is one of those where it feels a little bit confusing. And so if you zoom in and practice the very difficult part about it, then the rest of it will fall into place. So that's how you want to practice. Don't just repeat. Remember, zoom in to find the actual problem. Get comfortable with what the difficult part is. And then when you zoom out, it's a whole lot easier to play it. So let's try this for a second. We're going to go just an up on E, and then just a down on B, and just back and forth on that. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and right? Not terribly exciting yet, but the care that you take to focus on crossing the string will make a huge difference in everything else that you play. So now let's try this. We're going to go all of measure 1, where we're going to go. Right, so remember, we're going to accent 1 E and 2 E and so accent the down and the up. Ready? Just measure 1, 50 beats per minute. Ready, go. All right, so now let's put all of this together with our chord that we talked about, this E minor add 9 here. Ooh. So we'll go down 1 E and 2 E and then the next string and the next string and the next string. Don't worry again so much about speed in this, and if you need to only just play this a little bit slower, that's totally fine. Aim for clarity. The most important thing when it comes to picking is to not aim for speed. If you aim for speed, you will play things at a medium to fast tempo, sloppy. But if you really aim for playing with good clarity, speed is a natural byproduct of that, right? So that's one thing that I realized when I was working on some things to really start getting more speed. If I just sort of set the metronome to 340, right, and just try to, just go ahead and shred along with it, I might play every 12th note really, really clean, right? But if you want to get every note clean, you have to really break it down and understand it on a micro level. And it doesn't take a lot of time to focus on this. If you really, really zoom in and a very intense focus for just 5 minutes a day on your pick technique, 5 minutes of anything you can endure. It's not too, even if it's really painful to think that focused about it. But then you move on to the next thing you're practicing. And you're sort of just building in your muscle memory to start looking at those micro movements and really gain clarity in your playing. Then as you pick up the tempo, you're building up the micro movements that are already comfortable, and speed just naturally comes with that. It does take time to build stamina, but speed itself is just, again, a natural byproduct of really good, clear practicing. Okay, so enough yab, here we go. We're gonna go all the way through measure 1, and remember, first finger on the A string, 2nd fret. 4th finger on the D string, 4th fret. 2, ready, go. And then again. Right? And I find myself, I practice this all the time. I never get past doing these exercises because it's good to sort of recalibrate the connection and sort of the intuition between the pick and the proper string. So I just saw a question come through. Let me answer that, and I want to go jump back in here. Do you ever find yourself doubting or changing your picking technique when you see a tutorial of a great player? Absolutely 100%. Because every player plays very differently. When we started this, I was talking about, okay, watching Eddie Van Halen play this way. Paul Gilbert was playing another way. Michelangelo Batio was playing another way. And so I tried to mimic all of those different ways, and it never quite worked. Within good technique, there's a lot of freedom. So there's, we'll talk about, okay, how to hold the pick. We'll do that in a second. And if you need to anchor, a finger at another point, the whole goal is to make sure that you're efficient and you're clean and you're clear with what you're playing. So when I first saw Eric Johnson play, I did not understand, because the way that he would sort of bounce the pick, he did a lot of sort of the up and then a lot of this legato stuff, and I didn't quite understand how it worked. And when I watched someone like Pat Metheny play, he even plays with an opposite part of the pick. And he's got this really wacky style that is just absolutely crystal clear in every note that he plays. So the important thing is to know that when you look at all those players, not to make the mistake that I did and think, now I have to play like all of those. I have to hold the pick like all of those. Let that be a lesson that there are many, many different ways to hold the pick, to play cleanly, and you have to find a way that works for you. The most important thing when it comes to finding a good pick technique is just making sure your other fingers are not in the way. When I was sort of getting used to the Eddie Van Halen technique and then sort of went to this technique here with my index and thumb, I noticed that the side of my finger or my fingernail would actually hit the string along with the tip of the pick, and you don't want to do that. So what I do is I typically just sort of take like the first curve of the knuckle here, and I sort of place the pick there, and I have my index going one direction and my thumb going another direction, and I have a good stable grip on the pick this way. When I did this, when I had it, even you know, I talked before about the tip of the nail was sort of hitting the top of the string. If you move it back, that can work, but the problem is as you play, the pick turns this way. And that problem was driving me insane. And so now I have this, right? So I have the thumb going one direction, the index going another direction, and I try to make sure that the rest of my hand is really relaxed. I don't force a fist. I don't like force him all the way out. I know like George Lynch, when I would watch him play and he'd have his fingers all the way out there, that worked for him. But it doesn't have to be that way for you. Find something that feels really natural and comfortable. And then the other thing is making sure that you don't actually squeeze the pick too hard. And I didn't realize this because I didn't come across that until I discovered it one day, like, oh, I'm just holding the pick too hard. And when you do that, that's what makes the up so much harder, because you feel like the pick is just getting stuck on the string. The down is easy, right? You just bring the pick to the floor. That's easy. But going up, sometimes there's like that weird resistance, right? So a lot of it is just actually squeezing the pick too hard, right? So find a way that you can get a good grip. It doesn't seem to shift too far, right? Left and right. But also you can hold it loosely enough to get a good tone and not actually bump into the string. Because remember, we want to sort of think about gliding through the string and not cutting the string. And when I was doing the upstroke with my previous technique, I just felt like I was cutting and bumping into the string and nothing worked. It all sounded bad. So I just went to finger picking for a little while and then came back and tried to fix my pick technique. And that's why this exercise is important, because we're accenting a good downstroke and a good up at the same time. All right, so the next question, what is the make and model of your metronome? This is a Sabine, I think it's called, a Sabine Zip Beat. Zip Beat. I got this from, I think it was next to, you know, the Korg ones, you know, are really, really good, and they have kind of a digital click on it and a little digital needle that goes back and forth. So those are really good ones. I think it's like a little black unit. This one I really liked just because the click was loud and it didn't feel like a digital click. It felt a little more analog, and I'm a nerd like that. So it sounded a little more pleasant to practice along with. But yeah, Sabine, S-A-B-I-N-E, Zip Beat. And then again, you can see how it sort of goes back and forth with the beat. Okay. So let's move on to the second exercise. And what I want to talk about with the second exercise is building a pick and string intuition. When we were talking before about the bar chords, remember we were relying a little bit too much with the bar chord on this part of the hand, right? And when we want to train smart, right, in the Guitar Gym for Rookies, we want to make sure that we're aware of any tension that's happening in the arms, because that will show up in the playing, okay? So if your arm is really, really tense on this side, or if your wrist is really, really tense, you have to make sure you relax all of those, right? And building good string and to finger, a pick to string intuition will require you to practice really relaxed. So what I recommend, so we look at number 2, Jason, if you want to pull up number 2, the tab there, it's going to be this exercise, this chord right here, which is a really nice D major 9 chord. And what we're going to do is go down, up, and we're just hopping every other string. But again, you want to make sure that you have your good pick technique now, because this will apply to everything from scales, arpeggios, everything else that we can go through and that you'll tackle on your own. Make sure you're comfortable with that. And you'll have to go down on one string and then jump over the next string to go up. So remember, we practiced initially that down, up, playing on the outside of the 2 adjacent strings. This is where that comes in handy. So step number 1 is being able to play, really looking at the fingers and lining up. Okay, the pick goes here, the pick goes here. So it sounds like this. Right? With your second finger on the low E 2nd fret, third finger on the 2nd fret of the G, and then your pinky on the 2nd fret of the B. That's the chord, right? And when we're playing this to a click, we'll do this at 50 beats per minute. Step 1 is really being aware of it while watching it. And then step 2 is looking at something else or closing your eyes and see if you can really build the confidence of knowing when the pick leaves one string that you're going to play the next one and not one all the way up. And that's sort of like a real micro movement that your brain just needs to go slowly enough to really get that. So let's actually try that at 50 beats per minute. And now these are 8th notes. So instead of 1 E and 2, we're going to go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Okay? So as we do this, just remember, don't squeeze the pick. Don't squeeze the pick too hard. Hold on to it. Don't drop it. But don't squeeze it too hard because that will make the up very difficult. Okay. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... Now try the same thing and just look somewhere else. Don't watch your hand. You can look to start and then see if you can build a confidence after that by looking somewhere else. Excellent. So just a reminder, as we're going through this, if you have any questions, please ask them. Type it up, and it's sent to me by Jason here, and I can read them and try to answer them. Okay, so the next one here is number 3. What we want to talk about in number 3 is doing an alternate picking. So basically what we're doing is we're going to go double on each of the strings. So it's the exact same left hand chord position here. And then 1 E and 2 E, and so, and just down, up, down, up, down, up. What you'll notice when you look at the tab, I don't know if you probably have come across those before, and I remember when I first started seeing that down, up, guitar notation was a little confusing because the down looks like the bridge, right? And the up looks like it's pointing down, so sort of the opposite there. But you're starting with a down, and you're going to go down, up, 2 on each string, and then go to the next string and do the same thing. So let's try that together. Ready? 50 beats per minute. 2, ready, go. So now, after we've gotten comfortable with number 3, I want to talk a little bit about what's coming. So now we've done alternate picking, and now we're going to hop into something called economy picking. Before we do that, let's take a question here. Can you explain the correlation between the picking speed and 50 beats per minute? So basically what I'm doing is I usually line up the click. So let's go, for example, to measure exercise number 2. When I'm doing 50 beats per minute here, every time there's a click, it's going to be, so if you'll notice, exercise number 2 is in 3/4. So that means there's going to be 3 full beats in the measure. And then I'm going 1 and 2 and 3 and, right? So in this case, every time there's a click, that's going to be a numbered beat. And every time there's the silence in between, that's going to be the and. So 1 and 2 and 3 and. So if I go to 50 beats per minute, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, okay? But when I go to number 3, now I'm doing 16th notes. So that means that every 4 notes, the first beat is going to be where the click hits. And the rest of that collection of notes is going to be in the silence part. So if, you can see it on the Facebook page in the Jam Play universe. You know, you log in, get an account there, make sure you do that, and you can see and get the tabs and everything from the previous lesson. In the previous lesson, we did talk about sort of getting used to that space in between the clicks. And we're sort of building a grid, a mental grid. We're subdividing the beat. So that space can be 1 and 2 and, or 1 E and 2 E and. And so that's what's happening here. We're going 1 E and in exercise 3, 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 1 E and 2 E and. So that's what's happening there. The first of every 4 with the 16th notes, the first of every group of 4 is going to be the click. So I like to do 50 beats per minute because at a quarter note pulse, right, it feels slow, but now as you fill in some of the accents in between the clicks, that's when it starts to get interesting and you can build up a lot of speed with that. So that's how I'm processing or sort of thinking about the 50 beats per minute with the notes. So I hope that answers your question. Okay, so now what I'm doing here in number 4, this is called economy picking, and this is a little bit different. Getting a handle on economy picking can open up a lot of doors. Now, economy picking did not come naturally to me, but I know plenty of students that I've taught and plenty of other great players where that is the natural way that they learned. So what's great about learning this up front is there are sort of 2 different ways to play single notes here, and giving you the option to know that if you lean one way or another, that's totally fine. So alternate picking is where you're going down, up, down, up, down, up, no matter what. You're always going down, up, down, up. So if I played a scale, okay? Economy picking is different. Economy picking is talking about when you go down, up, down, right? If you have, for example, 3 notes on a string, you keep the pick going in the same direction to cross the string. And what does that mean? If I go down, up, down, at this point I would typically go hop to the next string and go up, right? But now I'm going to go down, up, down, down, up, down, cross to the next string, down. So the idea is whatever the pick is doing when you cross the next string, stay in the same direction. That's economy picking. It's sort of an economy of motion. We've talked about that before, no wasted movements. The only thing is that it sounds very different than alternate picking. So here's the difference. If I play just alternate picking, or economy picking has a little bit of a smoother sound. Alternate, economy. So sometimes people find it a little bit easier to build speed with the economy picking, but it also has more of a fluid sound to it. Sometimes you want something that's very articulated, and alternate picking is great for that. But if you want that sort of smooth strumming kind of sound, almost sweep picking with your scales, then economy picking is there for you. And I know a lot of people that even starting off, they just get used to just simple melodies here with economy picking without realizing it. So just look at your picking as you're practicing, and just know you may have an emerging alternate picking technique happening or an emerging economy picking technique happening. Be aware of it and just take note of it and embrace that. Make sure you practice the other ones. So if you're really comfortable with alternate picking, practice economy picking and vice versa, right? But just know that your natural state might be one or the other, and that's okay. So what we're doing in number 4 is we're going to do the same exact chord on the left, and we're going to go down, up, down, right? So 3 notes on each string. And the weird thing is that when we go back the other direction, you have to go up, down, right? So then you're sort of reversing. Remember, we're keeping the pick going in the same direction as we're crossing the string. And so that means you have to go up on the way back, all right? On the tab, you'll notice on the final measure in that, there should be a down where that final 2 is, but yeah, I forgot to put that in there. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's try just getting a handle on that motion to start. So you're going to go down, up, down, up, down. So just try that, down, up, down. Next string, down, up, down. And you'll notice that as you cross to the next string with the down, the pick almost rests onto the next string. So you're sort of almost slowly strumming up that chord. Now to turn around and go back again at the end and then to reverse all the way back, you're going to have to do 2 downs in a row just to repeat it. So that might feel a little bit awkward, but that's the motion there. And we'll apply this over another exercise in a minute, but I want you to get a handle on that. And if you're starting to feel more comfortable with it, then that's a great thing. So let's try it. 50 beats per minute. 1, 2. Dun, 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 dun. Ready, go. Sometimes I like to add a couple of extra notes in there to keep that phrase going. So just feel free to have fun with that while you're crossing the strings. Let's see, we'll go to a question here. Would you say that the speed of playing can be faster without changing the beats per minute? Yep, because basically what you're doing is just adding more notes into the silence. So if I'm going 1, 2, that's just quarter notes, eighth notes, 16th, 32nd, and I don't know if I can. I have to work on my 60, building up from there. But yeah, so you can play faster just starting with a really very slow click metronome. You'll notice that if you go, so if we're at 50, let's like bump it up to 100. The accent changes a little bit. Right, so you can still practice that way. It's just there's an extra click in there. So I hope that's not too confusing. I like to practice with 1 click. So I tend to have the metronome in the slower register as opposed to going really, really quick with the metronome, because you can build speed, but I'm getting comfortable again with the silence in between the clicks. And that's when you're really developing not only good timing, but learning how the movement between those spaces works. We don't want to just keep time. We want to know where the time is, but we want to develop a sense of groove. And a sense of groove is really actually playing with that time. Sometimes you go a little bit quicker or a little bit faster. You anticipate a note or you rush it, and then you come back to the click. And so I feel like I practice with a slower metronome with that because I feel like it trains that a little bit better. Hope that makes sense. Okay, so now let's go to number 5. One thing I want to talk about is that if you find yourself wanting to plant a pinky or something down, right? So like Michelangelo Battio did the 2, 3, and 4, right, on here, and then just sort of shredded the world out of existence. It was just insane. I look at that and it just doesn't make logical sense to me because I feel like I'm sort of restricting or building tension. And I know that he's very relaxed and very clean and articulate, but I just couldn't get that pattern. But I also knew that if I was only, maybe putting this part down like this, that could be a little bit problematic. So I tend to, not all the time, sometimes I'm just, when I'm doing single strings and crossing a lot of strings, I'll tend to have the sort of a relaxed fist. Remember, we're not forcing the fist. But one thing that you can do is just take your pinky and sort of plant here. And you don't want to plant down here. Now watch the difference here, because now as soon as I get past the B string, I'm stretching up to reach a string. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure if you're going to plant something that it's actually going to allow you, right, to go from string to string, and you're not going to have to reach anywhere. So I'm almost just pivoting from pivot from the pinky there, right? So down, up, down, up, down, up. So as you go through that, just know that that's an option. And I also tend to put rest of this part of the hand on the strings that I'm not playing, just to mute them so that they're not ringing out. Okay, so let's go through number 5. What we want to do with number 5 is go back to seeing how you practice the alternate picking. We're going to start with your first finger on the 4th fret, and then you're going to go to the 2nd finger on the 5th fret of the low E, and then go to your pinky all the way on the 7th fret. And then we're going to hop up to the 4th fret of the A and then back down. And that sounds like this. Okay? And then we're going to just go do that on every string. So instead of going back down to this note right here, to the 4th fret on the low E, we're going to hop up to the 4th fret on the A and do the same thing. And again, we're practicing that string, you have to hop over the string to play up, right? And then we're going to do the same thing with economy picking. So remember, alternate picking is always down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. Economy picking is down, up, down, down, right? Or up, down, up, up. Whenever you cross to the next string, you stay in the same direction, okay? So let's try this. I'll just start at 50 beats per minute, and we'll just play the first measure in there, okay? So just, and 2, oh, I'm back at 100, so let's go back to 50. 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, 2, right? From there, we're going to go to add the next measure in. 1, 2, dun, dun. Then back. And now let's add all the way up to the high. And what I didn't have on here, just for the sake of time with all to go through this lesson today, you can do descending as well. So after you get to the top, you can go all the way back down to the bottom. So let's try all of this together. So in measure number 5, 50 beats per minute, 50 beats per minute on measure number 5. I need some sleep. Ready, go. Down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. Again, go. Again, go. Last time, go. Excellent. Now, if you find that it's a little bit too much, maybe you're getting confused on the what's happening on the left hand, it's totally fine, because basically we're practicing the same pick thing, the alternate picking thing that we did on the previous exercises, where you just stayed planted on one chord. So don't feel discouraged or anything if this feels a little bit too tricky, or if it's too easy, that's fine. Again, just build up your subdivision. So instead of 1 and 2 and 3, try. You know, go from there. You know, sometimes adding a little palm muting can make it a little more metal sounding. So sometimes I'll do that. But don't feel discouraged or feel like if it's too simple or too easy. Just find a way to actually go up higher with the amount of notes that you're putting in between the click, or just back off and go right back to the chords. As long as you're practicing the act of going from string to string, that makes a really, really big difference. And here's why. If I'm going, it's not the most prettiest scale to listen to, but if we put that over a scale that sounds better, right? So now you can start to see how this pattern, once you get this sort of locked, then when you start changing the left hand patterns, then it opens up a whole lot more possibilities. But we want to build a good autopilot on this hand, and this is the beginning of doing that. So now let's look at exercise 6. And in exercise 6, we're doing the same exact thing, except now we're doing our economy picking instead of the alternate picking, right? So now we're doing the same thing that we talked about with economy picking before, but now changing the left hand, right? Down, up, down, down, up, down. Down, up, down, down, up, down. And you have to go down again. Okay, so let's try that. We're going to do this at 50 beats per minute. 1 and 2 and 3 and up, down, down. I'm sorry. Down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down. Again, go. Down, up, down, down, up, down. Down, down, up, down, down, up, down. Again, go. Down, up, down, 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 up, down, up. Last time, go. Right? And from there, you can actually build the other way. So if we're doing our alternate picking, or back down, or the economy. And then back down. Right? So that's a little bit trickier for me, and I usually throw on a metronome and sort of practice that. So you never get beyond cleaning up things. That's a really important thing to remember. It's sort of like staying fit, right? We're here at the guitar gym, so you may be able to do 100 push-ups and really work hard to do 100 push-ups, and then you stop doing them for a while and you come back and you can't do them, but you did them at one point, right? It doesn't mean you always can. You always have to kind of train to get back to being fit, right? Okay, so do we have any questions at this point? Just let me know. And we'll wind it down. We have just 2 more exercises here. If you have any questions about anything, feel free. Okay, so let's do exercise number 7. And what 7 is doing is starting with this idea of sweep picking. I remember the first time I saw this, there's a lot of really, really great players that can completely shred this. And the beginning of the concept to me, I like to do it kind of with finger picking. So that idea of sort of doing almost 1 or sometimes 2 notes per string, and you're almost strumming instead of picking. So like, right? So I'm kind of going down and then up, down, up, down. The beginning of that is really cool because that will really help develop good comfort when you're playing arpeggios, right? So we started out today just getting comfortable with doing the 8th notes on 1 string, then adding into 16th notes, and then we're going to do those on 2 strings, right? Sorry, with 16th notes, and then we did crossing the strings, and then the alternate picking and economy picking. And economy is sort of tied into sweep picking here. And here's how we want to do it. We're going to start with the pinky is going to be on the 5th fret of the D. And then your 3rd finger is going to be on the G, the 4th fret. And then your 2nd finger is going to go on the B on the 3rd fret. And your 1st finger is going to go on all the way up on the E string on the 2nd fret. Right? What's happening down here is as you pick, you sort of bump into the next string. And that's a really important thing to get used to as you build up comfort with sweep picking, is you don't want to pick each note, even though they're all a down. What you don't want to do is pick each note individually like this. You want to make sure that it goes, right? So you want to actually go down, bump into the next string. Just like when you strum, you don't take a break in between each string. You just sort of power on through, glide through the string. Then after we get to the top of that, then I'm going to go up here with an up to the 3rd fret on the high E, and from there I'm going to just do a pull off as I do an up, and then do an up on the 3rd fret here, and then on the 4th we're going to go up here on the 4th fret of the G. So that sounds like, this is a G major 7 arpeggio. I love this. This is, for me to get really used to the sweep picking concept. This was the very first arpeggio that I learned, and I feel like it makes sense. Now, one thing that's interesting is that you can, when you come back to the low note again, you can either do an up and then actually finish the rest of the sweep with a down, or you can go back to down. What I mean by that is this. Down, 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 up, and then pull off, so we're not going to pick a note here. Up, up, and then down, 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 up, pull, up, down. Or you could go down, 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 up, pull off, up, and then you do down on the G. It doesn't matter. I know, again, between alternate picking or economy, if you find one way is a little bit more intuitive for you, that's fine. Go with it. Okay, so what we want to do here is, and what's really important with an arpeggio like this is making sure that you know, obviously the direction of the pick, but making sure that your pull-off or your hammer-on is not for speed. As guitar players, anytime we see a hammer-on, what do? Or a pull-off? We play it fast. But remember, hammer-ons and pull-offs aren't just for speed, they're actually for effect. They're actually a color of the note, a color of playing the note, sort of an expressive quality, right? So make sure that the pull-off is actually still in time. And that's a really, really big thing to get used to. Instead of, right? Because then it throws off the beat, and we want to make sure we get locked into the beat. So let's try this. Here we go, 50 beats per minute, G major 7 arpeggio. 1, 2, ready, go. Last time. Excellent. All right, so let's see, we have a question here. Can chord shapes be sweep picked or only arpeggios? Chord shapes can absolutely be sweep picked, but here's the difference. If I play like a G, it just sounds like a slow strum, but if I play a G arpeggio with a sweep pick, it has a different sound to it because as I'm going to the next note, I'm releasing the note before it. So it has a very different sound than just when I strum one at a time. The previous note is still ringing out, so it just sounds like a slow strum. Right? So it gives a really different quality, and I love, a good solo always has a really good moment of, you know, you have those sweep picking parts, and again, I tend to do it more with finger picking. It's a little bit easier for me to do it with that, but getting used to, I first learned it with a pick, and that was very important. You can do portions of a chord that are sweep picked, right, like that, or you know, you can do it like that. So you sort of start with the chord and then build up from there. But the main difference there is that with sweep picking, typically the notes are only played and then they're stopped when you advance to the next note. Good sweep picking, I sort of explain this almost like a relay race. As one note is sort of stopping, the other note is picking up, right? And so it's sort of passing the sound or passing the baton from one note to the next. You don't want to drop the baton. You don't want, so da 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 da, you want da 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 da. So you're sort of passing the sound onto the next string, and that takes a little bit of getting used to. But we will go through that when we do a whole deep dive into arpeggios and how to play those. But I wanted to, in this lesson, because we talked about alternate picking, economy picking, sweep picking, I wanted to touch a little bit on that. Okay, let's do our very last exercise here. This is exercise number 8, and this is putting a little bit of this together. We're doing sort of a C major 7 sound. And again, I like to build these exercises so that they sound kind of nice to listen to as you play, aside from some of the, right, those aren't quite as fun to listen to. They're very fun to play, but not as fun to listen to. Okay, so number 8, what we're doing is sort of a C major 7. You have your third finger here, and then you're going to actually go open and then put your second finger on the second string, the second fret of the D string, and then you're going to go down here, right? You have a B minor 9, and then this chord right here is kind of like a D suspended, so put your third finger, your fourth finger, and then your second finger. So we have the 5th fret, and 4th fret, and then we have an open G with that nice tension there, just like that. You don't have to play in the third measure of exercise 8. You don't have to play that with your 2 and 4. I tend to do that. You could go 1 and 3. That is not quite as crucial, but right? So now we're getting used to this for this final exercise, doing individual notes. You can do your economy picking, or you can choose to do your alternate picking. I like to do the alternate picking, and now we're doing the picking along with a chord. So we're putting all that we've learned today into a musical context of going sort of like melody, chord, just so you get used to going in and out of a strum and single pick notes. And that ties back to what we first talked about initially, of building the intuition that the string is the pick is going to the right string when you want it to be there, right? So this exercise sort of brings that together. Sorry, we had a question here. Let's see, are alternate and cross picking the same thing? You know, I've heard that term cross picking before, and I always interpreted that as sort of the economy. But yeah, when you hear cross picking, I interpreted that as being sort of the down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down. I may be wrong on that, but I just like the terminology of alternate or economy picking. So cross picking, I have to look that up. I'm not sure. A lot of my time has really been spent on developing the finger picking, and I did a lot of work for years on the pick. But yeah, the cross picking, that was, I wasn't familiar with that. So I will look that up and get back to you on that. Okay, so let's look up exercise 8 right here. So let's try it at 50 beats per minute. 1 and 2 and 3 and... Again. Again. One more time. Excellent. All right, so we did a little bit of a deep dive on this, but again, I think it's important just to know your alternate picking, your economy, and your sweep picking, and what that means in crossing strings. That's basically what that is. When we're training smart here in the Guitar Gym for Rookies, it's really finding those micro examples of things that you can focus on to really clean up your playing. And how you cross to the next string is a really important way to do that. So as next time, we're not going to be next week, but the week after that, the first week in June there, we're going to be talking about playing major scales and different ways to do that. And so that's going to sort of rely on a good pick technique. So take time throughout this week to just take a couple of these examples and to just play through them. One thing that I found that is helpful, and I used to be really against this when it comes to practicing, after you really focus, right? We talked about a good, solid, mindful focus, even if it's just for 5 minutes a day, is really good to develop your pick technique. But once you get comfortable with the movement from one string to the next, then you can go into the repetition phase, right? And from there, it's really important to get comfortable. So sometimes I would literally throw on Netflix, right? And then just sort of try that exercise for the show. But you don't want to do that until you really have done the hard work of figuring out all the micro movements first, right? So we're sort of using the conscious part of the brain to get the crossing string really nailed. And then we're sort of putting it on the back burner and just getting it built into your muscle memory. Most of us guitarists, what we like to do as soon as we get something, even just a little bit, we move on and go right to the next thing. So just take time to really dedicate good focus on a small micro example, and then that's when the practicing starts. So you have to problem solve first, and then the practicing starts. It's not just, okay, I got it, on to the next. No, that's the moment that the repetition starts. So let's see if we have any other questions coming in. Doesn't look like we have any questions here. Well, I want to say this has been awesome. Thank you so much for tuning in again. And so next week we'll go through playing some major scales. The week after next week. And then the week after that, we're going to do some pentatonic scales, then arpeggios, finger picking, playing with expression, and then learning to play with others. So building a solo, doing rhythm guitar, and when you're having a jam, what does that mean? What does a good jam mean? So again, here we are at the Guitar Gym for Rookies, another installment this week. I wish you happy practicing and stay inspired, my friends. I will see you next time. Bye.